At 31, Daniel made what looked like a completely reasonable decision. He got a raise, his credit score was solid, and after years of driving an aging Honda that felt one repair away from dying, he decided it was finally time to upgrade. Nothing reckless, nothing flashy, just a newer SUV, safer, more reliable, better for work, better for weekends, better for the version of life he felt he had finally grown into. The dealership approved him fast. The monthly payment looked manageable. The salesman framed it the way they always do, not as total cost, but as a monthly number. And that's where most people stop thinking. Daniel did what millions of Americans do. He looked at the payment, saw that it fit, and assumed that meant he could afford the car. But 6 months later, the payment wasn't what bothered him. It was everything attached to it. Insurance was higher than expected. Gas cost more than his old car. Registration was more expensive. Tires weren't cheap. Maintenance on a newer, more complex vehicle cost more than he planned for. And suddenly, the car that looked affordable on paper was quietly eating a much bigger portion of his income than he ever intended. That's the trap most Americans fall into in 2026. They don't buy too much car because they're irresponsible. They buy too much car because they confuse approval with affordability. And those are not even close to the same thing. That's the real math most people never run. Banks calculate what you can technically qualify for. They do not calculate what that car does to your actual life after insurance, gas, repairs, taxes, depreciation, and everything else starts compounding around it. Daniel eventually realized the monthly payment was the smallest part of the decision. That's what shocked him. The car payment got him approved. The total ownership cost quietly made him financially tighter. And that's why so many people making decent money still feel squeezed. It's not always rent. It's not always inflation. Sometimes it's the car they technically could afford, but realistically should not have bought. And psychologically, this is where people get trapped, because cars are emotional purchases disguised as financial ones. People don't just buy transportation, they buy relief, reliability, status, comfort, identity. They buy the feeling of finally upgrading. And once emotion enters the decision, affordability gets distorted fast. Daniel didn't buy that SUV because he ran the full math. He bought it because the monthly payment felt acceptable and the upgrade felt deserved. That's how most people overspend on cars, not through recklessness, through rationalized comfort. If you're trying to figure out how much car you can actually afford in 2026, the answer has almost nothing to do with what the dealership says you can buy. Make sure you like, subscribe, and join Andrew Finance, because in the next part, we're breaking down the real affordability math by salary and why most people should be buying far less car than they think. The real question Daniel should have asked was never, what monthly payment can I handle? It was, how much of my income should my car be allowed to consume? That's the math most people skip, and it's the reason so many decent earners still feel broke in 2026. Because a car is not just a payment, it is an ongoing system of costs attached to one decision. And if too much of your income gets pulled into that system, the car doesn't just cost money, it limits everything else your money could have done. That's the real affordability test. In practical terms, most people should not be spending more than 10 to 15% of their monthly take-home pay on total car costs, not just the loan. Total car costs means the payment, insurance, gas, maintenance, registration, and repairs averaged across the year. That is the real number. And this is where affordability gets exposed fast. If you bring home around $4,000 a month, your realistic all-in car budget is not $700 or $800 just because a lender says yes. It is closer to $400 to $600 total, not payment, total. If you bring home $6,000 a month, your realistic range is closer to $600 to $900 all in. If you bring home $8,000 a month, maybe $800 to $1,200. And even then, the lower end usually gives you a much stronger financial life outside the car. That's the part people miss. Cars don't become dangerous because the payment is impossible. They become dangerous because they quietly crowd out everything else. Savings get smaller, investing gets delayed, flexibility disappears. One repair feels annoying instead of manageable. And over time, the car becomes more than transportation. It becomes a recurring drain on your ability to build wealth. Daniel started doing the math backward, not from what the dealer offered, but from what his financial life could actually support. Once he added everything up, he realized the SUV was consuming closer to 18% of his take-home pay. That meant nearly 1/5 of his usable income was going into a depreciating asset every month. And that's where the pressure came from, not because he was irresponsible, because he had unintentionally over-allocated income to transportation. This is where salary matters, but not in the way people think. Earning more does not automatically mean you can afford more car. It only means you can afford more car if your other obligations leave enough margin. A person making $120,000 with high rent, childcare, and debt may be able to afford less car than someone making $80,000 with low fixed costs and strong savings. That's why salary alone is not the answer. Margin is. The real math is not based on what you make, it is based on what your car leaves you with after it is paid for, and that is the number that actually determines whether a car is affordable.
Daniel didn't need a cheaper car because he was bad with money. He needed a better framework because the wrong number had guided the entire decision. Once he stopped asking what payment he could survive and started asking what level of car left his financial life strongest, the answer changed fast. And that is the smartest way to buy a car in 2026. Not by chasing the nicest car your income can justify, but by buying the most reliable car that protects your cash flow after the excitement wears off. That is the real goal. Because the best car purchase is not the one that feels impressive in the dealership. It is the one that still feels easy to carry 12 months later when life gets expensive. Daniel eventually realized the smartest car is usually not the most car you can afford. It is the most car you can buy without weakening everything else. That means the right car is the one that still leaves room for savings, investing, emergencies, and flexibility. The right car is the one that does not force your future to shrink just so your driveway can look better today. And that is where most people get trapped. They optimize for approval, comfort, and image in the short term, then spend years absorbing the long-term cost. The better move is simpler. Buy reliability first, buy efficiency second, buy comfort third, buy status last if at all. Because reliability protects your time, efficiency protects your monthly cash flow. Comfort matters, but only after the math works. And status is the most expensive category of all because it adds cost without adding function. That is where most people overspend. Daniel also learned that the smartest way to buy in 2026 is to create financial friction before the purchase, not after it. Set your real all-in budget first. Estimate insurance before you shop. Price maintenance on the exact model. Check registration costs. Stress test the payment against one bad month, not one perfect month. If the car only works when everything goes right, you cannot afford it. That is the rule most people should be using. Because affordability is not about whether the payment fits your current month, it's about whether the full cost still feels manageable when life becomes less convenient. That is the real test. A good car should reduce stress, not become a source of it. It should improve your life, not quietly tighten it. Daniel did not need to avoid buying a better car. He just needed to stop letting the dealership define what better meant. Better was not the bigger SUV. Better was the car that kept his finances stable after he bought it. That is the real math in 2026. Not what you can get approved for, not what your salary can technically support. What matters is what the car costs you in flexibility after it's yours. So how much car can you actually afford? Less than the bank says, less than the dealership suggests, but probably more than enough if you stop paying for image and start paying for durability.
If this video opened your eyes, make sure you subscribe, because what you learn today can save your future tomorrow.